In the town of Bleakridge, members of the Neighborhood Watch are being murdered. How did the Neighborhood Watch not see that one coming? We're talking the most lawless village in Midsomer.
The history of citizen policing.
And office romances on this episode of
Welcome to Midsomer.
Hello, and welcome to Midsomer, the podcast where we dissect all the mysteries, the murders, and the many weird things about the long-running hit TV show, Midsomer Murders. I'm your host, Eric Buscher, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Eileen Becker. Hey, Eileen.
Hey, Eric. Today we are talking about Crime and Punishment, the second episode of the 19th series. It originally aired January 4th, 2017. It was directed by Rennie Rye and written by Paul Logue. Let's watch it. Edit. Neighborhood Watch. Watch it. Yeah, whatever.
Wah, 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 wah. Spoiler warning, we will be discussing the events of this episode, including the identity of the murderer. So if you haven't watched yet and don't want to know who done it, pause this and go watch it. You'll still be here when you get back.
Bleakridge, the most remote village in Midsomer, surrounded by moorland.
Sounds like a horror movie.
It was a scary place for a while. Crime rate was unusually high for a small village. It had a reputation for being lawless until 2 years ago. Problem was location. Village was so far out, it took our lot too long to respond to calls. By the time we turned up, the damage was done.
Assuming word got out.
Oh, they flocked here. Burglars, car thieves, joyriders, fly tippers.
Gangster's paradise, sir.
It's night in the village of Bleakridge, and members of the local neighborhood watch are busy. Whether they're tracking speeding cars, telling local pub owner Mitch Ferreira that he's open 2 minutes past closing time, or writing copious parking tickets, they are just super helpful. All of a sudden, watch member Azim Mir calls in a code red, sending at least 15 watch members over to Angus Colton's butcher shop. The front door is unlocked, and when they investigate, they find Colton dead in the freezer. Well, yeah, that's where you put dead meat. The next day, Barnaby and Winter arrive. Apparently, Bleakridge used to have a reputation for being lawless due to it being the most remote village in Midsomer. It took so long for police to respond that it became the go-to spot for thieves, joyriders, hooligans, miscreants, and all-around bad boys. There's a part of me that really just wanted to write the whole speech from Blazing Saddles in this one. However, 2 years ago, Ingrid Loxton started the watch after the unsolved hit-and-run death of her brother Frank, and she has brought law and order, dong-dong, to the village. Maybe too much. Coroner Kam says Colton died due to blunt force trauma to the back of the skull and that the body in the freezer means time of death will be hard to pin down. Colton was a more than adequate butcher and a founding member of the watch. Frank was his brother-in-law, married to his sister Maxine, who has been staying with him along with her daughter, Tara. Maxine says she has no idea who wanted to kill Angus and that Ingrid had him investigating a series of burglaries in the area. Did he get too close to the culprit? As the detectives leave the Colton residence, they are watched by cousins Henry and Jensen Marsh. The detectives next visit the pub, where they walk in on local cafe owner Barbara Walton and her husband Duncan celebrating an honor from the council. They talk to Mitch, who admits to arguing with Angus and throwing him out. Mitch says the watch acts like dictators in the village, forcing people to comply with their rules while getting away with whatever they want. That night, a hooded figure sets fire to an abandoned barn. Kam reports that Angus had injuries on his ankles and wrists from a set of restraints, but they were sustained previously in the month. They also look into the robberies he was investigating. Some of them were at watch members' homes, and Angus found a shoe print in the dirt outside of them. Angus called Mir at 5 a.m. the night before he was murdered, apparently to borrow Mir's camera, a camera that is now missing. Why did he call him at 5? Like, if that happened to me, I would kill the guy.
Yeah.
Through a credit card receipt, they find out ex-con Henry was at the butcher's. But he is trying to go straight and narrow, and he's also having a secret love affair with Maxine. Lena Ferreira, Mitch's wife, was also at the butcher, desperate to smooth things over with Angus because he supplies the pub with food. But Barnaby thinks she's holding something back. Maxine is being comforted by her best friend Barbara when Ingrid stomps into the cafe to talk to her. Maxine doesn't like how Ingrid fills Tara's head with all these ideas about her late father. Tara is still grieving and doesn't understand why her mom doesn't seem to be as well. At the next watch meeting, Barnaby and Winter arrive to interrogate Adrian because the night before someone broke into the pub and flooded the kitchen, assaulting Mitch in the process. Adrian had recently been let go from the pub and seems the likely culprit, but Ingrid covers for him. After they leave, she tells Adrian if he defies her again, she will run him out of her village. That night, someone breaks into Mira's store and sneaks up on him while he stares at photos on his computer. He turns around and is killed by a blow from a hammer. Tourist info. Bleakridge is known for being, as we said, the most remote village in Midsomer County, which means it's a long way from the local constabulary. Or constabulary. How's it? Constabulary?
That's a hard word to pronounce for Americans. Constabulary.
Yeah. Known for being a haven of bad behavior and petty criminals, the village has really turned around since the establishment of the local neighborhood watch. They've really cut back on the crime. And all the fun. Come visit the village if you love going to bed early and getting massive parking tickets.
Yeah, just a really fun place, I gotta tell you.
So, what does it mean to be the most lawless village in a county with this high a murder rate?
That's gotta be a pretty good distinction. You would have thought that, like, maybe, I don't know, Badger's Drift would have had that honor, but I guess those are just lawful murders there.
I mean, is it based on the fact that they just can't arrest anybody? Because every place in Midsomer is pretty violent.
Yeah. This is not a county known for not having crime.
Yeah. Like, it does bear the question, especially with Bleakridge, why would anyone live there? If you're like going to be murdered or burgled or run over on the road or be forced to live under the dictatorial neighborhood watch.
Personally, I love the kind of combination of a Dickensian bleak house named for the town and Rockridge from, as you pointed out, Blazing Saddles.
Yeah.
And of course, the Crime and Punishment obviously comes from the Dostoevsky novel.
Right. Although I have to say, is like the real influence in this episode really feels that the movie Hot Fuzz.
Oh yeah,
which in and of itself, I've always thought had a real Midsomer was possibly influenced by Midsomer. The director Edgar Wright like started in television. He would have been working in television at the time of Midsomer, like kind of just beginning to go on air.
Mm-hmm.
So he clearly would have been readily aware of it.
Hot Fuzz feels like almost a parody or a satire of Midsomer Murders.
You know, Hot Fuzz was a pretty successful film. If you're not familiar with it, it is written and directed by Edgar Wright, co-written and starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. It imagines a Michael Bay action film in a small, quiet English village. It is a hoot, but it is definitely the level of violence is definitely Midsomer appropriate, and part of the premise is that a neighborhood watch has gone way off the deep end. Even down to Adrian in this episode is a very tall, powerfully built, bald guy. And there is a character in Hot Fuzz who is very strong and bald, but simple-minded and can only speak in yarp and yarp. And I kept waiting for Adrian to go yarp.
It would have been great if they could have gotten Timothy Dalton for this episode.
So the Watch is basically a private vindictive police force.
Yeah, which is not really how, and we'll discuss this in a little bit, but that's not really how neighborhood watches are supposed to work. They are not really supposed to hand out tickets and do stuff like that. Yeah. They're supposed to watch, keep an eye on things.
Right. And in this case, Barnaby describes him later on in the episode as like a rural Stasi, which is pretty accurate. I mean, they are shocked to find out that there's 24 people on this neighborhood watch, when in their own neighborhood, only 2 people showed up for a neighborhood watch meeting, and they were for the cookies.
Yeah. And it also acts almost like a homeowners association, with them policing the sandwich board that was outside the cafe and stuff like that. So, yeah. And those have a notoriously Stasi-like reputation as well.
By the way, 24 people of a neighborhood watch is more people than I've ever seen in the Coston police force offices, which explains a lot.
Yeah, which is why they have such a high crime rate in Midsomer County.
Yeah. But they clearly are enjoying their power. That in the beginning, when you see Adrian is using a radar gun on Lena, who's just driving home and catching her speeding like a few miles. Like it's not even massive; it's just a few miles. The pure joy of catching her on his face.
Yeah, he's definitely power hungry.
I mean, they're very gutsy. Like when they interview Ingrid, who's clearly very much a bully. Like in the middle of her interview, she just sits down and starts kind of dismisses the police.
Yeah. And they're used to that kind of person, but they're usually the local gentry. They're the lower, they're in the manor. She's just the local bully who's running the neighborhood association.
Yeah. Not only that, when they ticket the police car twice.
That's ballsy.
Yeah. Yeah. First time you may not know it's a police car. Second time you knew it's a police car.
Yeah.
By the way, how would they even enforce the tickets?
They do not have enforcement powers. They are not deputized police officers.
Right. There's not even really a pretense. At one point, Adrian says to hell with the police, which is kind of a weird thing to say for a legitimate neighborhood watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're not even really that good at it. Like when they go in the opening scene and they investigate the butchers, right? They're all running around with their flashlights. Why didn't nobody turn on the lights?
It's weird. Yeah, it's like, okay, let's just all skulk around like we're on CSI or Law and Order or the X-Files or something.
Which is also, again, pretty dumb. Just turn on the lights.
Yeah.
Also, they were shocked that there's blood on the floor of a butcher.
Yeah. And you should always check the freezer because how many bodies in mystery shows end up in freezers?
Yeah, a lot. The high praise of Angus Colton's, he was more than an adequate butcher.
I know. That line just got to me. I just laughed so hard at that one. And I just want to say that Aunt Ingrid is not pretty cool.
No, there's a whole thing with Maxine and Tara that we'll get to in the second half, but there was some of that story didn't quite add up to me. And we'll talk a little bit later more about that. But before we go any deeper, and since we're talking about neighborhood watches, Eileen, why don't you tell us the history of neighborhood policing?
Okay. While the modern neighborhood watch is fairly recent, community policing has long been a part of urban life. While the military was often used to keep the peace, in many cases they weren't enough. In 9th century England, Alfred the Great established a system known as tithings, in which communities were divided into groups of 10 families, called tithings, each overseen by a chief. Every male over 12 years of age was required to participate in a tithing, and the tithings were responsible for the good behavior of everyone in the household. Tithings were connected to larger groups called hundreds, so that criminals could not escape to a different village. The hundreds were overseen by reeves, and were parts of larger groups called shires, which was headed by a shire reeve, or sheriff. Posses could be formed to hunt down criminals, and fines could be levied against the entire shire. So we have sheriffs and posses, just like Blazing Saddles. This system was continued after the Norman invasion under the Frank Pledge. Basically, this system was a surety that everyone would be fined if criminals escaped, making everyone responsible for ensuring peace. By the 13th century, the office of constable was formed, and eventually the position became the first police-type official to be tax-supported. Watchmen were established in urban areas to guard city gates, patrol the streets at night, act as firemen, and get their picture painted by Rembrandt. In the 17th century, we start to see the beginnings of police forces established by the government, and King Louis XIV of France established the first organized and uniformed police force in Paris in 1667. In England, however, it was still very much a citizen's duty to apprehend any criminal and to participate in the peacekeeping process. A government-run police force would have been seen as a threat to liberty. Rewards for the apprehension of criminals became the norm, though some criminals, such as Jonathan Wild, would game the system by organizing a robbery and then collecting the reward. Very clever. In 1797, a salaried force was set up to police the docks along the River Thames in London, which saw huge amounts of crime. In 1829, the Metropolitan Police Act established the Metropolitan Police Force, which was set up as a distinctly civilian force wearing a blue rather than military red uniform and carrying only a wooden truncheon and a rattle to signal for help. Neighborhood watches, groups of civilians who patrol the neighborhood to prevent crime and vandalism, were first established in the U.S. after the 1964 murder of Kitty Genovese in Queens. The public was appalled when the New York Times reported that 38 witnesses saw or heard the attack, but that none called the police or came to her aid. This report, however, was later proved erroneous. The National Sheriff's Association created the National Neighborhood Watch program in 1972. In 1980, McGruff the Crime Dog debuted in a series of public service announcements on TV and radio, sponsored by the National Crime Prevention Council, urging everyday people to take a bite out of crime.
Was that your best McGruff?
I've never been good at McGruff, I'm sorry.
Take a bite out of crime. Although that sounded like McGruff was rabid.
Yeah. McGruff was not supposed to be rabid, Eric. In 1982, the first neighborhood watch in the UK was set up in Mollington, Cheshire, and was called Home Watch. Under the Home Office, the Neighborhood Watch Network was established in 2007. The National Pub Watch, a partnership of licensees unified to fight antisocial behavior in pubs, was established in the 1990s. Neighborhood watch groups and pub watch groups coordinate with police, who advise them on occasion, but neither are run by police. There have been controversies over the years, especially in the U.S., when in 2012, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was killed by Neighborhood Watch coordinator George Zimmerman, who exited his vehicle and carried a gun. Both violations of Neighborhood Watch recommendations, and we're not going to go into that wormhole. As these groups are decentralized and made up of volunteers, there are few, if any, regulations that govern them. In most cases, participants don't even have to pass a background check.
It seems to me like the latest offshoot of this is probably what they're calling like citizen sleuths.
Mm-hmm.
The true crime junkies that like sort of scour the internet. The Netflix documentary "Don't F with Cats," which was about citizen sleuths tracking down a guy on the internet that they saw murdering cats, is probably one of the most prominent examples of this. There's even like a TV show, I think, that didn't last long, which was about tech mogul Mark Zuckerberg, who creates a app where citizens help the police solve crimes. And it just makes you wonder like how much the police really appreciate this kind of efforts.
And we'll get into more the history of policing in another episode, a little more in depth on the organization and everything. But there were, especially in England, and I found this very interesting because it's not exactly known as it had a king. It's still a monarchy. But this whole idea that having a government-sponsored police force would be an affront to their liberty was kind of interesting to me and surprising.
Yeah. Shall we jump into cast highlights?
Sure.
All right. Let's start with Vicky Pepperdine, who played bad driver Barbara Walton. Pepperdine got a late start in acting. She worked for a charity organization and then in publishing until the age of 27, when she enrolled in the East 15 Acting School. Afterwards, she teamed up with Melanie Hudson to perform a comedy duo called Hudson and Pepperdine, getting their own BBC Radio 4 show. Now, she is best known for co-creating, co-writing, and co-starring on the sitcom set in the National Health Service called Getting On, which also had an American adaptation. It's partially inspired by her parents, who worked in the NHS. She's also appeared in A Young Doctor's Notebook, Up the Women, We Hunt Together, The Windsors, and Magic Mike's Last Dance. She also co-hosts the podcast Dear Joan and Jerica with her friend and frequent collaborator, Julia Davis. Katie Kavanagh played professional spanker Lena Ferreira. She studied at RADA and the National Youth Theatre and made her screen debut in 1997 on the show Wycliffe. Now, she is best known for Julie on Coronation Street, in which she appeared from 2008 to 2015. She also played Julie in the 2012 stage adaptation called Coronation Street, Street of Dreams, where her character helped guide the audience through 50 years of storylines. And you thought theater was dead. She's also appeared in Dalziel and Pascoe, The Bill, Murder on the Blackpool Express, and as the voice for the supermarket chain Iceland. Joe Sims was pub vandalizer Adrian Peck. He got bitten by the bug when a drama teacher introduced him to the Bristol Old Vic Company. He has won an Offie Award, which is the London equivalent of an Obie, for his performance as an alleged killer from Texas in the play As We Forgive Him. Now I really want to hear his Texas accent. On screen, you might recognize him most from his role as Nige Carter in Broadchurch, as well as The Lost Honor of Christopher Jeffries, Free Reign, Doctor Who, Chuggington, and Ruby Speaking.
Yarp.
Sarah Powell played Secretly in Love Maxine Loxton. Powell was born in Jamaica and studied acting at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. Her first on-screen role was in Between the Lines in 1982. She would go on to appear in Holby Blue, Damned, Last Christmas, and Doctor Who. She's also done a lot of theater work, including the West End debut of Neil LaBute's Some Girls with Leslie Manville, Saffron Burrows, and David Schwimmer. You also could currently see her in some theaters as part of the National Theatre Productions broadcasts of The Seagull, starring Game of Thrones Emilia Clarke. Phoebe Campbell was magically vanishing teen Tara Loxton. This is only Phoebe's third role. Prior to this, they appeared in Home from Home and The Last Dragonslayer. Now you might recognize them from their role as Lady Rhaena Targaryen in House of the Dragon. Sam Troughton played ex-convict Henry Marsh. He comes from an acting family. His father is the actor David Troughton, who appeared on 2 Midsomer Murders episodes, and his grandfather is Patrick Troughton, otherwise known as the second Doctor Who. There's a lot of interesting Doctor Who connections in this episode.
Yes.
Sam has a lengthy career working with the Royal Shakespeare Company and appearing in Hex, Alien vs. Predator, and Vera Drake. He's been on a roll lately, appearing as the actor John Houseman in the film Mank, as well as Chernobyl, Ragdoll, The Outlaws, and Lidovenko. James Atherton played needy cousin Jensen Marsh. Hailing from Cumbria, Atherton's biggest role to date was as the serial killer Will Savage on the show Hollyoaks. I tried looking up that storyline, and it seems super duper complicated. He's also appeared in Coronation Street, Sanditon, Ackley Bridge, and most recently in Vandervalk. Emilio Dorgesing was mild manner Azim Mir. He's a British Indian actor who first appeared as a hotel manager in an episode of Uncle Jack and Cleopatra's Mummy, way back in 1993. He's gone on to appearances in Game of Thrones, Kingdom of Heaven, Silent Witness, Red 2, Ted Lasso, and the Sister Boniface mysteries. In 2023, he played Andy in the stage adaptation of the acclaimed novel A Little Life. Clive Swift was perpetually aghast Felix Hope. He was a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company and an accomplished stage actor. He was married to the novelist Margaret Drabble from 1960 to 1975. His best-known on-screen performance was the hit BBC sitcom Keeping Up Appearances in the role of Richard Bucket, or Bouquet. He also has appeared in Excalibur, Doctor Who, Hitchcock's Frenzy, A Passage to India, Peak Practice, and The Old Guys. This episode of Midsomer was his final performance as he passed away in 2019. And playing dead butcher Angus Colton was no idea. Again, this is a case of Midsomer Murders, giving an important role with no lines, no credit. So if you know who played this guy, let us know.
It's so sad when they don't credit the dead people or some poor guy who appears in many scenes but never says a word.
I'm wondering if that's a payment thing.
Oh, I'm sure it is. We have many return visitors this time, starting with Marty Cruikshank, who played watch member Cecily Hope. She appeared in the episode Orcus Fatalis. She also has acting in the blood. Her dad was the famous Scottish actor Andrew Cruikshank. She studied at the Central School of Speech and Drama and the Drama Center, graduating in 1963. Her first on-screen role was in 13 Against Fate in 1966. Since then, she's had a steady career appearing in Z-Cars, Kavanaugh QC, Line of Duty, Call the Midwife, and most recently in The Crown. Philip Bird was Duncan, I Need a Spanking, Walton. He also was in the episode Hidden Depths. He's a British character actor with a long list of credits, starting with a role as Swampy Warrior in the classic Doctor Who story The Power of Crawl. He would go on to appear in Slinger's Day, French Field, Emmerdale Farm, Doctors, and most recently in Call the Midwife. Before he was an actor, he was the singer, guitarist, and songwriter for a new wave band called The Strips. In 2020, Bird relaunched the group, now just called Strips, and has been releasing new music on YouTube and Facebook. If you're trying to Google them, good luck. Lots of Strips and Stripes out there. You can find them on YouTube at Strips Music. And while you're there, subscribe to Welcome to Midsomer.
Always be plugging.
We discussed Frances Barber, who plays Neighborhood Watch tyrant Ingrid Loxton, when we discussed Masterclass. She played Constance Fielding in that episode. She starred in the cult classic Sammy and Rosie Get Laid and was the infamous Eye Patch Lady, Madame Kavarian, on Doctor Who. She's worked with Gary Oldman multiple times, as well as Kenneth Branagh, Peter Greenaway, Dennis Potter, the RSC, and the National Theatre. She's appeared in The Bookshop, Poirot, Philip Stars Don't Die in Liverpool, and the upcoming show Dodger. Currently, she is on stage in the Stephen Moffat-written, Mark Gatiss-directed play The Unfriend. This episode also features a large number of uncredited extras who have done multiple episodes of Midsomer Murder, filling out the world as background characters. There are way too many for us to go into detail for each one, but we want to acknowledge them here. So thank you, Sean Lucas, Bern Colaco, A.K. Steppa, Deborah Rock, Mike Ray, Susan Fordham, Stephen Hawke, Ty Hurley, Joe Wheatley, and Glenn Webster. And of course, this episode included an uncredited appearance from the mayor of Midsomer, Chris Wilson. We still want to interview Chris Wilson on the show. So Chris, if you are listening, come on our show!
Always be plugging.
Now, our village star this week was Neil Morrissey as Mitch McAllister. Morrissey was born in Stafford, and both his parents were psychiatric nurses. Morrissey and his brother spent a lot of time as teens in foster homes. After studying acting at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, he got his first on-screen role in The Bounty with Anthony Hopkins and Mel Gibson. In 1992, he would join the series Men Behaving Badly, which made him a recognizable star in the UK. He also was the original voice of Bob the Builder in the UK version of the show until 2011. He also appeared in Waterloo Row, Grantchester, Line of Duty, The Syndicate, and most recently in The Good Karma Hospital. In 2009, he took a break from acting to run a pub, the Punch Bowl Inn in Martin cum Grafton, which sounds very midsummery.
I thought he did a fantastic job in this episode as sort of a tortured husband, struggling with his own guilt, his own kind of the defeat of not living up to his dad.
Yeah. I thought he brought a lot of depth to a role that could have been a throwaway, but the way and we'll talk about some of the things later, but the way he brought so much depth and emotion to the lines, especially in relationship to his wife when he finds out what she's been doing, that it really made him stand out. And you see where you can see what a really good actor can do with a role, even when it's not always there on the page.
We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back with the second half of Crime and Punishment. And we're back. Let's look at the second half of Crime and Punishment.
Nothing happened.
Are you sure about that?
Absolutely.
What about the hotel bar?
What about it?
I remember karaoke.
You murdered like a prayer.
And the dancing?
That was later. In your room.
Well, I guess we just had a few too many.
I should say so.
Well, the whole night was a blur.
I can't remember a thing.
So then we can't say for sure that nothing happened now, can we?
Kam reports that Mir has the same restraint scars that Angus did. He also had a lot of threatening messages from Mitch on his phone, but that's not special. Mitch got drunk that night and sent threatening messages to the entire watch. Much better. Much better. He also went out and smashed up Adrian's car. Adrian wants to smash Mitch's face, but Inga reminds him they have bigger problems. The rest of the watch is concerned with their safety and want to disband. Ingrid refuses. Winter finds a secret room in Mir's shop that's housing all the stolen merchandise. Looks like he was the burglar, which is weird because he seemed financially stable and none of the merchandise has actually been sold off. Ingrid tells the detectives that only way to erase the stain on the watch is for them to help solve the murders. Wait, what were they doing before?
I have no idea.
The only thing missing from Mir's shop is his laptop. You know, the laptop we saw him on right before he got murdered. Luckily, his files are in the cloud, so they find what he was looking at. Photos of a barn. They track it down, and yes, it's the one that burned up in the first half. Inside, they find a car with front-end damage that they link it to Frank's hit and run. And that car belongs to Duncan Walton, who tells him it was stolen the night of the hit and run, and that he has a solid alibi. They find elements of hair dye in the restraint wounds, so Barnaby tracks down Lena, who runs a traveling salon. It turns out she has a side hustle, traveling dominatrix. And her clients included Angus and Mir, as well as Duncan. She did this before she married Mitch and has taken it back up to help make money because the pub is failing. She's tried to keep it a secret, but Mitch followed her to the hotel, and then he confronts her and in a powerful scene tells her to get out, though he has a change of heart by the end of the episode. With Mir revealed as the burglar, the watch is in real trouble with the village. The evidence keeps piling up that Ingrid was involved with the burglaries, and Barnaby confronts her. The burglaries started after the watch had lost their government funding and were an attempt to make it popular with the village again. There was lots of calls between Mir and Ingrid on the days of the break-in, and the morning of the last robbery, the pair had an argument in a coffee shop in Coston. She was blackmailing him over Lena's sideline. Adrian admits that Ingrid had him stand down the patrols on the days of the burglary, but there is no actual physical evidence to connect her, so they can't arrest her. Meanwhile, Henry tells Maxine he wants them to move to Wales. She's reluctant, and Jensen is worried he will be left behind. So Jensen reveals to her that Henry drove Duncan's car the night Frank was killed. She tells the police, and they arrest Henry after a little chase. Henry admits he got drunk the night of the hit and run, and rather than walk home from the pub, he found the car with the keys in it. So he drove himself home. When he woke up the next day, he saw the damage to the front end and heard the news, but he knew he didn't hit anyone. Now, afraid no one would believe him, he and Jensen hid the car. Barnaby talks more to Duncan and realizes that Barbara was also driving the car that night. He tracks her down to Ingrid's, where she had gone with Maxine to tell her about Henry. When Barnaby shows up, Barbara runs to the roof and threatens to jump. Here's the reveal. Frank was an alcoholic and abusive to Maxine. Barbara would keep an eye on Frank to try and keep her safe. On the night of the hit and run, she tried to give the car to Maxine so she could finally escape, but Maxine chose to stay. Driving back, Barbara saw a drunken Frank and decided to save her friend. Afterwards, she panicked and left the car on the roadside with the keys still inside. She expected to be arrested, but when the car disappeared, she figured she was in the clear. However, Angus, in his hunt for the burglar, stumbled across the car in the barn. He let Barbara know he had found the car, so she killed him to keep him quiet and then burnt the bar. Mir told her that he had found an image of the barn on the laptop and was going to take it to the police, so she killed him too. Don't tell Barbara anything. Eventually, they talk her down, and as she is taken away, she has one final confrontation with Ingrid, calling her a bully, just like her brother. So, Barbara, I actually had a lot of sympathy for Barbara, especially at the end when she's on top of the roof threatening to kill herself. It seemed a lot of her motives here were just simple love and then to fear.
Yeah. Yeah, I did find her to be a sympathetic character. I'm not sure that we had enough clues to really zero in on her.
No, there's no real... I think there's a period where I was pretty sure Mitch did it. And then I was thinking it might have been Ingrid, which would, but I thought the Barbara solution was pretty... I thought, especially as they've kind of gone on the later episodes of the show, there's been a lot of killers that you have a real sympathy for. They don't really seem to kill out of greed. They seem to kill out of pain or fear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand why she just didn't burn the car, too.
Yeah. The car is sort of half burned. The whole thing with the burning of the barn doesn't look convincing The shrubbery around the barn is not burned. The barn is only kind of half burned. I think if she were really wanting to destroy the evidence of the car, that would have been the thing she should have burned first and thrown gasoline on, not the
Yep.
barn itself.
It just made no sense. But again, she seemed to be getting away with murder purely by luck and coincidence as opposed to any real clever planning.
Yeah.
Now, part of the red herring, of course, is that Henry was driving the car, who was involved in a relationship with Maxine, which I thought was very much a sweet story, but because by the end of it, we don't get any real resolution for them.
That is true. And I would have liked to have seen something that kind of tied their story together and maybe seen the daughter one more time. She just disappeared in the whole second half of the show.
Yeah. The daughter thing struck me as weird because the daughter, would you say, was like 15?
Yeah.
13 to 15 somewhere?
Yeah.
Her dad was only dead 2 years, and her dad was an alcoholic and an abuser. The daughter would have known that.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't really hide things from kids the way that adults think that they can hide things from kids.
And she's old enough to understand what that was. So the weird sort of, I love my dad, tell me all these stories about my cool dad thing, really only made sense if, like, Maxine hid the abuse. If they hid the abuse from Tara.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, like, kids know.
Yeah, kids know. And I think the weird thing is that, she thinks her dad is cool. She thinks her Aunt Ingrid is cool. And these are the two worst people in the village, except for maybe the Adrian.
Yeah, and I also think that, like, if the dropping her is weird because, like, we get the reveal that he was in, like, it's not even that huge it's not even that shocking a reveal. But we get the reveal that Maxine was abused by her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you would think that with the scenes of, like, the daughter just kind of berating the mom about dad, then you would have at least, if you're implying that the daughter doesn't know, then you would give that story a little resolution by the mom, by Tara discovering that her dad was an abuser, or that Ingrid is not as good as she says, like, or has been covering up, and kind of resolving them together. But, like, a lot of these personal stories, they just sort of leave them unattended.
Yeah.
Sort of drop them.
Yeah.
And I was a little bummed by that because they really sort of set that up and then there's no payoff.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if the secret of Maxine and Henry is so bad that it needs to be kept from everyone, why is Barbara just blabbing it in front of everyone in that cafe? Like, at top volume, not even whispering.
Yeah.
The one personal side story you do get sort of resolution on is Mitch and Lena.
Mm-hmm.
Where he kicks her out, and then we kind of just, that really quiet, I thought beautifully acted scene of just says, "Don't go." That's all he says.
Yeah. I think what he brought to what could have been just a simple line reading, so much depth and emotion to it, that it really made that part outstanding. That for me was the highlight of the show, was their relationship and the way they played off each other.
Those two scenes where he tells her to leave and then he asks her to stay, I thought was really beautifully acted.
Yeah.
We've seen in a lot of these, especially in the more recent years of Midsomer, that these villages seem to be grouped around similar interests and hobbies. Is this the BDSM village?
It could be. We have a heart attack village. We have a knitting club village, or a mahjong village.
And this is the village of very naughty boys. Strange kill? Is getting hit on the head with a hammer strange?
Nah. It's very Maxwell Silverhammer.
Yeah, very average kills in this episode. However, when Mir is being killed, he is blasting opera in his shop very late at night, and I was like, well, this neighborhood watch really doesn't care about noise complaints, obviously.
Yeah.
I looked it up, the opera, well, I feel 100% convinced this is the exact same opera song that is used in the Untouchables film during the murder of Sean Connery.
Probably. It's been a while since I have seen that movie, But this is a very, very famous aria from an opera, and it's used a lot in movies because it is so dramatic.
It's Pagliacci, Act 1, Vesti la Gubbia. I don't speak Italian.
Yeah. And it is very, very famous in the US for being the "No More Rice Krispies, We Ran Out of Rice Krispies" song from the ad from the 1970s. It was a very dramatic ad, obviously.
I don't remember this ad at all. If you remember this ad, please write to us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com.
I remember that ad. It's even referenced in The Simpsons.
Simpsons references too much. Detective work in this episode. Early on, when describing Bleakridge, Winter describes this as gangster's paradise. Barnaby just looks at him blankly.
Yeah, I don't think that's in on his playlist. It wasn't done by Black Lace.
I was just like, how do you not know this? I mean, this song was, well, again, I don't know what if it was like in the UK, although I'm pretty sure it was everywhere over there too.
Yeah.
Why weren't the police informed about an arson? 2 major felonies in one area are always connected.
That is true. There also seemed to be a weirdness about them looking up who the owner of the car was and not seeing that it was reported as stolen.
Yeah.
At least right away. So.
Yeah, there just seemed to be just some weird, not really bothering police work. Also, when they are looking up the file on Henry, what the hell was that database photo of Henry?
He looked like he was at a party and they were taking selfies when they were drunk.
It looked like he had dropped his phone, and as he was picking it up, accidentally took a photo and then posted it on social media. And then, of course, Winter's chase through the woods. Always make the younger guy get a little cardio in these episodes.
Yep. In his tight pants. And Winter had some very tight pants in this episode.
And then he never got to change out of anything else because he had to lose his tie and his unbuttoned shirt and he'd lose his tie and his jacket, and he had his shirt unbuttoned for the rest of the episode, looking like he was a night out on the town. Coroner, and we were shocked. This is our first episode with Coroner Kam. Now, Manjinder Virk was born in Coventry, where she began acting in the Belgrade Youth Theatre. She also has a love of dance and got a degree in contemporary dance from De Montfort University. Her first on-screen appearance was in 1999 in a small role on Holby City. Now, the roles got bigger very fast, as she would go on to appear in The Bill, Doctors, Brits with Riz Ahmed, Monroe, and Ordinary Lies. In 2016, she was cast as Kam, making her the first British Asian actor to join the regular cast, and still the only one.
Yeah.
This was a big deal because only a few years earlier, the former producer of the show had made some very controversial comments about casting non-white actors. She appeared in 10 episodes over 2 series before moving on, making way for our beloved Fleur. Now, she recently has appeared in Trigger Point and The Devils. She also is an award-winning filmmaker. Her most recent short, Things We Never Said, which she wrote and directed, just played at the LA Shorts Film Festival.
That's very cool.
Yeah. I always liked this character.
I did. I think they didn't give her quite enough to do sometimes, and it was always seemed to be tied in with her relationship to Winter.
Yes. So this episode makes a real meal over the Winter Kam affair. The characters apparently met at a training course and had a drunken night. They claim to not remember well. Well, she claims to not remember well, and Winter just is super cocky.
He's very cocky. I mean, he basically goes in and demands that they go out to dinner together.
Yeah, not real cool.
Yeah.
Did they have sex?
Not sure.
Not
My guess is on yes.
Yeah. But is there chemistry?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I will say this: the Winter and Kam chemistry was very palpable. I'm wondering where that would have led to had she stayed with the show.
Mm-hmm.
The Winter Fleur chemistry, not so much.
No. It's not quite the Tom Barnaby, Ben Jones level of chemistry, but it's pretty darn good.
Yeah. Home life. Sarah gets involved in the whole Kam Winter thing. Obviously, still raising young Betty.
Yep.
So she's clearly bored.
They didn't give her a whole lot to do, so it's almost like they had to give her something. So they did this. Ooh, I'm going to be a rematch maker with Kam and Jamie.
I thought she was just stirring the pot.
Yeah.
She pushes John for info about their rekindling the flame. And John looks at her appropriately, like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I do think this is like a good episode that sort of points out the difference in the dynamic between the two core Barnaby families.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Joyce was so busy with her classes and everything like that. She really wasn't super interested in the goings on of the police force.
She really wasn't, unless, of course, she happened to come across a body. But she also, with her constantly being out doing things, she had a life that was tied to the home but still outside. Sarah works from home but seems to have nothing else other than the job. They haven't really given her other hobbies.
Well, she goes to the school, and then she's also in the historical society.
Yeah.
She does work at the school. I think she's just more active she's just more curious, I think, about what's going on in the she's also seems much more interested in being friends with like the coroners and the DIs in a way that, like, Tom never brought them home.
Well, they did have dinner a couple times with George Bullard, but I think that's because they were old friends from a long time, but they weren't exactly hosting dinner parties with each other.
And John doesn't seem like a real people person.
No, and I think that's where Sarah has to bring the people in for John to kind of
be mean to.
Yes.
Final thoughts with this episode.
This is one where, and I was thinking about it, it seems like it's, in a way, less than the sum of its parts. There's some very good parts in it, some very good acting. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. The mystery seems a little weak, and it really shouldn't have been. I mean, there's some really good characters in it, but things get dropped, are left unresolved, and it's ultimately a little unsatisfying for me.
I don't want to say it's too many stories. It's not enough resolution.
Yeah.
They leave so, like, what happens with Ingrid? What happens with Maxine and Tara? What happens with Maxine and Henry?
Mm-hmm.
What happens with these people in the watch? Like, how are they, how is the village going to respond to the free of their tyranny? Okay. They don't resolve a lot.
Yeah.
The episode, and I think part of that is they spend a lot of time on the Winter and Kam thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have like scenes of them, the dinner and then the barbecue at the end. And there's a lot about that story that I'm kind of wondering if the resolution on the other stuff, they just cut for time, which I think is a mistake, because I think, they have more time. They will have other things other episodes to develop the Winter and Kam storyline, pushing it forward. They only have this episode to tell these people's stories.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think there was some missed opportunities with fleshing out what happens when a town ultimately loses the focus of the people who are in charge of keeping everyone safe.
And I think they probably also cut for time some scenes that develop Barbara more as a fuller, because that scene at the end is wonderful. And, Pepperdine is a BAFTA-winning actress. This is post Getting On. Like, she is a recognizably good actress. Could have easily been the village star, except she's just only given that scene at the end.
Yeah.
Everything else is just sort of, whereas Mitch gets, Neil Morrissey gets to have these scenes throughout the episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have appreciated more focus on the villagers themselves, less on the Kam Winter issue, and just, I think that would have made this a richer episode, because it felt like the elements were there, and I just felt a little bit of frustration that it wasn't as full as it should have been.
Yeah. I enjoyed the mystery. I enjoy this episode,
Mhm.
but I also, because I think like the character, but one of the reasons I enjoy it is I think they created some interesting character in this village. Like I really liked the Maxine character. I was really interested in Mitch and Lena. I was interested in Henry. I thought they like the Henry character I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to know what happened with them.
Yeah, but by not giving us any resolution, it's just sort of, it's, I think sometimes they get so focused on the mystery that they forget that the reason people like watching Midsomer is the weirdness, but they also like, you create interesting, Midsomer can create very interesting character stories.
Yeah. And the village dynamic that goes along with these characters that are in there. And this one did have a lot of those scenes of the village that we haven't always quite gotten in more recent episodes. And it is a village where they filmed it that they have used in other episodes as well. But you get more that this is a village thing, because you've got the neighborhood watch and everything that's going on with it. And you've got these interesting characters, and it just fell short. This could have been a really great episode, I think. But instead of getting the revolution, you get a line about Jamie Winter posting that the ribs were glorious on social media.
I mean, realistically, what they could have done was cut the pub being flooded. It's extraneous. It doesn't really add anything. And we had that without, which it doesn't add anything. It doesn't clear Mitch. It doesn't, clear Adrian. It doesn't really expand on the fact that the watch is a kind of a corrupt institution. And instead, like, it's just there as this kind of thing, which is, it's an interesting little moment, but at the expense of giving us some character resolution.
Yeah.
That's probably like a 2-minute chunk that could have been written out to give these character arcs a little bit of closure.
Yeah.
Well, that's everything we wanted to talk about. We want to thank everyone for listening. If you have anything you want to discuss about Crime and Punishment or Midsomer Murders, please feel free to email us at welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. Also, write to us if you want to ask Eileen to stop doing the British accent. If you
Never.
If you want us to use the email in the show, please say so. We are also Welcome to Midsomer on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. And as we mentioned earlier, we are now on YouTube, where we are currently slowly getting our back catalog of episodes up on there. We have, as of this recording, a couple of episodes. Please subscribe to us there. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing us or rating and reviewing us on iTunes. That helps a lot of people find us. You can also review us and subscribe to us on all these podcast apps. Please tell your friends about us, especially if they are Midsomer Murders junkies like we are. This is Eric jumping in real fast to remind everyone that we are still looking for your Midsomer Murders stories. What are the episodes that got you hooked? What are your favorite episodes? What's your least favorite episodes? Who's your favorite detective team? Who's your favorite characters? All that fun stuff. We want to include all of it in a special 2-year anniversary show. So please send all that to welcometomidsomer@gmail.com. We will be back soon with another episode, and we hope you will join us again. And as we take the road out of Midsomer, we want to thank you for listening and remind you that in Midsomer, telling Barbara anything can be murder.
And usually is.
Welcome to Midsomer is produced by Eric Buscher and Eileen Becker. All clips in this podcast are used in compliance with the U.S. Copyrights Act fair use exemption for criticism and commentary. Our logo and podcast art was designed by Smeedrai. Our theme music is by the infamous Space.
which we discussed those and made a little reference to hot fudge, and when we discussed
Hot fudge?
when we discussed when we did okay.